I was 18 and had just graduated high school when this happened. A bit of backstory. I was bullied pretty heavily throughout my 4 years of high school for my weight. I wasn't huge by any standard, but even if I was, that shouldn't have made it okay to be tormented in the way that I was. I was slightly overweight, but I live in a very small town in the Midwest. My graduating class had only maybe 60 people or so. I have no idea why I seemed to be the only target when it came to relentless harassment about my weight, when there were other people that were even bigger than me. But either way, it made me feel incredibly insecure. It had gotten to a point where I wasn't just bullied by the awful people at my school, but I also continued the cycle against myself when I got home. I was disgusted by what I saw in the mirror. I would come home crying almost every day after school, and the only thing I ever dreamt of was simply being fit. That's all I wanted. I figured that once I finally got skinny, I could rub it in the faces of everyone who ever said I couldn't do it. The month that I graduated high school, I decided it was time for the big change. I was done feeling sorry for myself, and frankly, I just wanted to be healthier. I felt like putting all my energy into becoming a better me. I knew that I could do it, and it would make me feel worthy again. I talked to my mom about it, and she suggested getting a gym membership. She even said she would pay for it, as a sort of graduation present from her and my dad. Of course, I wanted to take her up on the offer, but at the same time, I'd always been kind of creeped out by our local gym. It was in this very small building in a very sketchy part of town. Then again, pretty much every part of our town was the sketchy part of town. I guess you could say in the end I went against my better judgment though, and the next day I found myself at that gym, waiting at the counter for someone to help me sign up. A short, heavy, older man came out of the back room and sat down at a desk nearby. He didn't strike me as someone who would be running a gym, let alone being in one, but I had no right to be judgmental myself. I brushed it off and didn't give it too much thought. He told me the rates and said the gym was the best in town, which sort of made me laugh a little because it was the only gym in town. He really didn't seem to like that though. His voice was raspy from cigarettes, and I could smell his breath all over him. "What's so funny, huh? You don't think my gym's very nice? You know, you don't have to be here, little girl." I stopped laughing quickly, confused by how harsh he was being. I was very quick to apologize. No, your gym's very nice. That's why I chose it. I mean, no offense, sir. I'm really sorry about that." He chuckled a bit and said, "I was just messing with you, princess. Lighten up a little," and a wink soon after. I remember feeling extremely creeped out by him. I didn't like the vibe that he was giving me, but at this point I'd already signed up for the next month, so I was going to be going. I wasn't going to waste money, and also, part of me felt like maybe I was reading too much into things. It's not like I would have to go through spending much time with the guy at the gym anyway. He didn't seem particularly bad or anything. I guess it was just a little off-putting with his sense of humor was all. I thanked him and walked out of the gym, eager to put some space in between us. I had made some plans to work out that day, but I was having a bit too much anxiety from that encounter. So I went home and decided to do it tomorrow morning. First things first, I woke up and actually was very excited for once. Got my gym bag all ready and headed out on my way. I grabbed a smoothie on the way for breakfast, and by about 9 a.m. I was in the parking lot of the gym. Before I even walked in, I saw the very same man working the front desk. There were a few other people in there this time, so I didn't feel as uncomfortable going in. I pulled open the door and scanned my card before I walked to the door of the women's locker room. The man working the front desk rushed into his office only a few moments after I went into the locker room, which I found a little bit odd, but you know, it's his job, so whatever. I think I should mention that his office was directly next to the women's locker room. I put my belongings in the locker after quickly getting changed into my gym clothes and locked it with a lock I had brought from home. For the next several hours, I worked out a bit and listened to some music. I tried thinking about how life was going to be when I went off to college in a few months. By around 12 p.m. or so, I was done with my workout and ready to head home. I started making my way toward the locker room to change my clothes again and grab my things before heading out. As I did so, though, I noticed that the front desk man rushed to enter his office again at exactly the same time. That was certainly very strange. For the next few weeks or so, every time I went into the locker room, the man at the front desk would go into his office at the same time. It started feeling less like a coincidence and more like a deliberate act. It wasn't just me either. This happened whenever any attractive woman would enter the locker room. He would always go into his office in a hurry. There were a few times I could hear the man coughing from inside, and occasionally there would be a tapping sound coming from the wall the mirror was situated on. At first, I chalked it up to thin walls and tried to move on. After 3 weeks of going to the gym every day, though, one of my very close friends told me he'd seen a picture of me getting dressed circulating around one of the Facebook groups he was in. It was a group of a bunch of other men from around town who posted jobs they were offering or work they were looking for, so when a picture of me randomly showed up there, he knew something was very off. He showed me the picture, and I was completely shocked. It was a picture of me getting dressed at the gym. The worst part is that for the life of me, I couldn't figure out how the person had even taken the picture in the first place. Because of my insecurity, I never got dressed at the gym unless no one was in the room with me. If there was even one other woman in the room, I would wait until she left before I got dressed, which also meant it was only me in this picture. My friend showed me that this wasn't the only photo uploaded either. There were almost 30 photos of women from our town getting dressed inside this same gym locker room. Some were more undressed than others. Thankfully, the comments were mostly people telling him to take down the post immediately, but there were a few gross ones as well. Lots of men saying it was sexy the women didn't know they were getting pictures taken of them. I was disgusted. Thankfully, my photo wasn't of me completely exposed, but for some of the women it was. I started to feel sick to my stomach. It was supposed to be a safe place. I knew I had to go to the police. I wasn't just going to sit around and watch these pictures, including mine, be passed around for everyone to see. By the time I'd mustered up the courage to call, though, I was informed they already knew about what was going on, and they would take my statement if I wanted to come down to the gym and to answer some questions. You may find that weird, but like I said, it was a very small town, so when something like this happened, every available cop was on it right away. It was the most action they'd see all year. I went down and answered whatever questions they asked. I learned that the reason the front desk man was always going into his office when I or other women would enter the locker room was because connecting his office and the woman's locker room was a two-way mirror. We couldn't see him, but he could see every inch of us. Why he decided to post these pictures, I don't know. He had to have known he would get caught, and during the trial he said he didn't regret it one bit. He even said that he thought all the women wanted him, and that's why they signed up for memberships at his gym in the first place. He was definitely some type of narcissist, mentally ill in some fashion. He ended up being sentenced to 3 years in state prison, where he's still currently residing. The experience was quite frightening and made me feel gross for a long time. I didn't let it discourage me though. I joined another gym a couple of towns away and ended up falling completely in love with weightlifting. There's one warning I'd like to give to women and men alike. If you're ever getting undressed in a place you aren't familiar with, always check the mirror. You never know if there could be another person peering at you through that glass. Being a personal trainer is relatively easy work. I'm only in my mid-20s, so I haven't been doing it for very long, but it's great being able to help people work towards achieving their goals in a healthy, safe way, free from any judgment or harassment. What I didn't expect is all the attention I would get from women and their husbands. You see, most of my clients are women, married women, and their husbands don't seem to like another man watching their wives work out or helping them with their form. Now, that's completely fair, I understand to a certain extent, but I've never had an outright issue with any of them. I can always feel the awkward tension when they're working out though, keeping an eye on us. I've never done anything, but nothing could have prepared me for this one instance. As a man, I had never really worried about being followed at night or having someone become obsessed with me to the point where I felt like I was being stalked, but that's exactly what happened. I had a client that was moving out of town, so a spot opened up on my client list. The gym I worked at had a board that I was able to put a little sign on. Basically, it just said a new spot was open and had a location where to email me. I got around 20 or so emails from people looking for a personal trainer, but to be as fair as possible, I went with the first person who actually reached out. She was a woman in her early 30s named May. She told me she and her husband had just had a baby the year before, and she was looking to lose her baby weight and be comfortable with her body again. Our first session was pretty normal. I set up a pretty low-key workout plan for her that she completed with ease in about an hour and a half or so. Now, just so you understand where my shock at this situation came from, let me tell you just how ordinary May came off in the very beginning. During the first few sessions, all she would talk about was how much she loved her family and how amazing her husband Jacob was. She would tell me all the romantic things he would do for her and spend at least 15 minutes every session showing me pictures of her baby. I found this pretty endearing. I was pretty used to people telling me about their personal lives while they train, given that there's not much else to talk about, and I'm sure it eased their anxiety to talk about the people they loved. Personally, I'm not one to talk about myself while working with clients, and that's never been an issue before. I'd say around our 5th session or so, though, May began insisting I tell her about myself. She started saying things like, "A man like you surely has a beautiful woman in your life. I bet your girlfriend feels super lucky to have someone as sexy as you." I wasn't worried about the comments in the moment though, as things like that I'd heard from most of my clients. Usually I'd laugh it off and nothing would happen. Only this time when I tried to do the same thing, she gave me this very serious look and with a stern voice said, "Well, are you gonna tell me about her or not?" I was a little off guard by her sudden change in demeanor, so it took me a second to answer. I don't have a girlfriend. As you can see, I'm a little too busy for relationships at the moment. And, besides, I have enough women in my life with all these clients I have to take care of." The last part was meant to be a joke, but I could tell she was obviously not taking it as one. "You only have a few female clients, don't you? What are you, some kind of pervert that likes to prey on vulnerable women?" That's when I started getting a bit uncomfortable. I'm not one for confrontation, so I didn't say anything at first, but she continued to insult me. I couldn't just stand there as she demeaned me in front of multiple people in the gym, who were now staring at us. "Look, I don't appreciate that shit you're saying, so I'm gonna have to ask you to leave if you don't stop. I don't talk about my personal life, and this is the reason why. I've never done anything to you, so I hope you calm down and recognize how inappropriate this is." I think that really embarrassed her. Her raising her voice at me got the attention of most of the people around us, so when I confronted her, everyone was looking. She picked up her bag and left immediately. To be completely honest with you, I assumed that would be the last time I ever saw or heard from her. The whole experience was of course awkward. I had multiple people come up to me afterwards and ask what the hell that was all about. I did get an email from her a couple of days later, but it didn't sit quite right with me. "Hi, it's May. I'm really sorry for what happened a couple of days ago at the gym. I kinda lost it when you mentioned the other woman you train. I hate the thought of you around another woman, touching her while she works out the way you touch me. I guess I got a little bit jealous being around you. The past few weeks have made me realize how much I want you, how much I need you. I thought you wanted me too. I could see the way you looked at me, scanning every inch of my body from the moment we first met. I know my feelings can't be one-sided." Yeah, this did freak me out a little bit, especially because I had no fucking idea what she was talking about. I basically just interacted with her completely normally. I never touched her at all, unless it was to correct her form, and even then it was just like her lower legs or her arms or something. I never touched anybody in a place that would be considered inappropriate or possibly make them feel uncomfortable. When I read that email, I started to really worry that maybe I'd done something wrong. I had no idea she'd gotten such an impression from me. Everything had always seemed so normal. I emailed her back and, in the nicest way possible, told her I had no such feelings for her. Everything I was doing was simply a part of my job, and I was sorry she felt like it was something more than what it was. I also mentioned that it would be a good idea for me to not be her trainer anymore, since I wasn't very comfortable with the way my actions were being misconstrued. I tried keeping it short so nothing could be misunderstood, but the email I got back from her only minutes later made me realize there was nothing I could say to change her mind about me at all. Oh, I see. This is your work email then. You have to say stuff like this. That's okay. I'll see you later. We can discuss our relationship there. She left it at that. I went into work the next morning and immediately went to see the manager. I told her of everything that happened and showed her the emails. She told me not to worry, but she was glad I'd brought it to her attention. It made me feel a little better about the situation, but something was still bothering me. My next client went in and I went straight to training her. She was an older woman named Nita. Honestly, she reminded me of my grandma who had passed the year before. We had become great friends in the few months I'd been training her, so I had no issue telling her about what was going on with May. She seemed shocked, if anything. She warned me it could quickly turn into something ugly if I wasn't careful. In that moment, I started getting worried. Toward the end of our session, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted May hiding in a corner. She looked down when she noticed I'd spotted her, almost like she really didn't want me to know she was there. After Nita left, I grabbed my bags and started to head out. I decided to stop for some groceries on the way home. Imagine my shock when I ran into May there. She bumped into me and acted like she was surprised to see me, but I knew she'd been following me the entire time. "Who was that woman today at the gym? Are you guys together or something?" I asked her to leave me alone, but it made no difference to her. She grabbed my arm and pulled me back towards her as she began to question me. I slipped out of her grasp and simply ran to my car. She followed me and started apologizing for her behavior while attempting to rub herself against me. She kept on asking why I didn't want her. Before I knew it, she pinned me against my car. I was much stronger than her though, so I did what I had to do and pushed her off me. She fell to the ground, and before she could get up, I got into my car and locked the doors. After I pulled out, I made sure she wasn't still following me and drove right to the police station. I was able to obtain a restraining order against her a few days later. When I showed them all the emails she kept sending, they were able to obtain the security footage from the grocery store as well that showed her following me the entire time. Nothing would stop her though. For several months after, I would see her everywhere I went. Restaurants, bars, the beach, even when I went on a vacation. She just wouldn't leave me alone. Thankfully, the gym I worked at had security, so every time she tried to follow me, she was escorted out of the building. She never tried speaking to me directly again, but honestly, just seeing her everywhere was scary enough. Whenever I called the police to tell them she was there, by the time they arrived, she'd be mysteriously gone. For a year, I was stalked by May after. She sent letters to my home and left gifts on my doorstep, not normal gifts either. She'd leave her dirty underwear or cuttings of her hair and fingernails. It got to the point that whenever I found anything on my doorstep that wasn't something I ordered, I immediately threw it in the dumpster outside. I tried to inform the police, but after the 100th time, they told me I didn't need to tell them about it anymore. They just kept telling me to let them know if she did something physical to me again, and I hated that. I considered moving, but I was stuck in a lease and breaking it was more than I could afford. Thankfully, she never tried to actually break in. Otherwise, I'm sure that would have been the last straw. Over the next couple of months, I became increasingly paranoid. It started affecting my other relationships, and I became a miserable person I didn't even recognize anymore. One day, I stepped outside and noticed it was the first day in a year I hadn't found anything on my doorstep from her. The next day, the same thing. In fact, that whole week I got nothing. I finally stopped seeing her around so much too. In the end, I ended up getting an email from her that said she basically blamed me for her husband divorcing her and getting custody of their children. I quote-unquote tempted her with my body during our sessions, and she couldn't help but pursue me. She said she wanted nothing more to do with me, and told me to leave her alone from then on. It was super confusing, but I was glad it was finally over. I was happy to let her believe I was the bad guy in the situation if it meant she'd finally fucking leave me alone. I do see her around town every so often, but now she just acts like I don't exist, and I'm very okay with that. My family grew up in the rural area around where we lived. My parents weren't rich or anything, but we did have a fairly decent life. This was in the 70s or so things were a lot different than they are nowadays. It was a lot more common back then to see someone driving down a country road with an open beer between their legs. Although I don't live out in the country now, nor have I in quite a long time, I at least like to think that things like that don't happen nearly as often anymore. I learned to drive myself when I was about 12 years old. This was not unusual for me or my family. And it wasn't too strange either for one of us to take the car out and go somewhere. I had a lot of friends my age who chewed tobacco as well. I tried it a few times, but I didn't really care for it. Around this time, I was good friends with a guy named Vance. We had grown up in the same general area up on the ridge. Our houses weren't really that close together, but we rode the same school bus to school. We were friends all the way from kindergarten until sometime in high school. The reason the two of us stopped being friends in high school was due to a girl he had liked for years liking me even more. Although I wasn't really interested in her and would never have dated someone my friend had his eye on, this made him really angry. After a while, he just kinda stopped talking to me. A while further after that, he became very antagonistic to me as well, which was pretty horrible because no one wants to lose a friend in a situation like that. It's not like I made the girl like me or something. When I was 17 years old, I was home by myself on a weekend night. I decided to take one of the old cars and see a different buddy of mine who lived a bit further up the ridge than I did. It was about an hour's drive to his house, since it was a dark dirt road the entire way there. You had to be real careful out on some of these roads. They were right on the sides of hills, and there was not anything like a guardrail to keep you from driving off the side and dying. When I left that friend's house to go home, it was already pretty late. I went outside and could see it was actually a little bit foggy out. It was not ideal to drive this path in that weather, but it just meant I would have to take my time and be more careful when driving. However, it was not too long after I'd begun that I noticed some lights behind me. Another vehicle was now coming my way. The road wasn't really wide enough for more than a car and a half, so this person could not pass me by. Still though, he didn't stop at all. He drove up upon me really fast. In fact, just before he slowed down, I almost thought he was going to slam into me and shove me off the cliff. He had gotten as close as possible to hitting me, then backed off just a bit. When this person was about a car's length behind me, he started to flash his high beams on. Then he sped up just enough to almost slam into me again. Just before he'd hit me though, he slowed down. Now he kept his high beams on, which made it very difficult for me to see the path ahead. I tried to pull my car over just a bit to let this guy pass me by. I was really trying to let him go, assuming that's what he wanted. This guy made no attempt to pass me though. He did the exact same thing, pulled up really close to me, then backed off again. This time he began to honk his horn angrily as well. I began to get very nervous. Every time this guy repeated this pattern, I got even more scared. I tried to speed up now, which I was very hesitant to do. I didn't like driving fast down these roads. even when there was not any fog. That didn't change anything though. When I sped up, he matched me perfectly. He kept getting close as if he was going to hit me off the side before backing off yet again. He did this over and over while still honking his horn at me. I don't know how long this kept up, but finally we got into the bottom of the hill, so there was no risk of running off the side anymore. We were still in a highly forested area though. Thankfully, by that point, I was not far away from home. I thought I could make it there, and at least I knew my family would be home by then. If this guy followed me all the way home, my brothers would be there to help me kick the crap out of him. No sooner than that thought entered my head, however, the car did its same pattern again. This time though, it did hit me. I reacted by slamming the brakes, which caused my car to spin and skid off the road. The only thing I remember after that was nothing. I woke up in the hospital 3 months after the accident. My car had slammed right into a big tree. I hadn't been wearing my seatbelt in that moment. The only thing that kept me from flying through the windshield was the big steering wheel that my head and chest had bounced off of. I had some pretty bad head injuries, and I had been out for the entire time. I guess I had opened my eyes after a month, but had not been acting like myself. They told me I was aware, but it was like nobody was there. I don't really remember exactly because it was so many decades ago. I had a violent and sort of feral behavior that required me to be restrained to my bed for a while. Then, suddenly one day, the day I felt like I woke up, I just went back to normal. I never found out exactly who was driving that car that rammed me. However, some other people who knew me in high school later told me that Vance had been bragging that it was him after it happened. Vance's dad worked at the police department, so there was never an investigation to see if he had done it. That, of course, convinced me that he had. I don't live out in the country anymore, but I really hope it's harder these days for crooked people to get away with things like that now. Now, let me first say I know a lot of people might not like this story. I've been listening to scary stories for a while, and it seems like the ones people get most riled up about are the ones about bullies. And this just so happens to be a story about bullies on Halloween. I was picked on for as long as I can remember. Never really had too many friends growing up, and not even nerdy friends. I was mostly one of those kids that just kept to myself. I guess that's why I was bullied so much. I always sat in the back of the classroom and never raised my hand or volunteered to do any group work. In fact, I absolutely despised group work. And besides, no one wanted me in their groups anyway. For the most part, I didn't really care about all this. I just liked living in my own world. It did bring a lot of abuse my way though. There was name-calling, which no matter what people tell you is bad and can hurt you quite deeply, and I would occasionally get shoved down, although the bullies never did go so far as to try and beat me up or start fights with me. When I was around 14 years old, I was still going through this kind of thing. It bothered me a lot more though, because of course, those are the years boys have tons of testosterone in their system, and they get a lot more mean and aggressive. I started to get a lot more teasing, and really came to hate high school gym class. I was shy about changing in the locker room, and that didn't really help my popularity at all. During the fall, it got a lot worse. I was looking forward to Halloween though. For the first time, I was going to have the house all to myself. My parents were going to be going out to a party. I enjoyed being home alone, and it seemed like Halloween would be the perfect day to do it. We didn't get much trick-or-treat traffic in our neighborhood, but I planned to keep the lights out and pretend nobody was home. I had some movies I was going to watch and just have a quiet and alone night. I was at home watching a movie when I heard the strangest noise. It felt like someone was tapping on my living room window. It got my attention at first, but I figured it must just be an animal or something. I didn't really pay that much attention to it. Another time went by and I heard that same noise again. This time it was coming from a different window though. The exact same noise, same number of taps, just a different area. That was really concerning, and I paid more attention to it this time. I looked over out the window though and was not able to see anything. I tried to pay attention to my movie, but it was hard to get back into it. Just as I was beginning to, I once again heard that tapping noise, except this time when I looked at the window it was coming from, I saw someone outside. It was just for a split second, but I saw them duck down out of sight. I knew immediately what was going on. I had been bullied enough and it was Halloween, so I knew the kids who bullied me were trying to play a cruel prank on me. Well, I was not going to put up with this. I went and turned on some lights to show that someone was home, and then I decided to go to the door and tell the bullies to get the hell off our property, or I was going to call the police. When I opened the front door though, I was cut off before I could say anything. There was a jack-o'-lantern sitting on the front porch, covered in what I thought was fake blood. It had razor blades sticking out of it all over the place. It was lit and smiling at me. That made the entire thing just that much more terrifying. I took it as a threat. I closed the door and immediately went and called the police. I don't think the bullies expected that because they hadn't left yet and were still trying to torment me. They tried to run off when the police arrived quickly. I guess that was my Halloween trait, seeing the police scare the crap out of those bullies who had scared the crap out of me for so many years.